The
You
baby
can't
wasn't
stay out
breathing
here.
right.
Get inside now.
9-year-old
the
Eli
baby
Mercer
is
pressed his
cold.
palm against
get you
Nova's
both
tiny
warm. Come
chest
on.
beneath the soaked army blanket, feeling her heartbeat stutter like a dying engine. Rain hammered the asphalt behind him. Blood dripped from his split lip onto her forehead. Somewhere in the darkness, Wayne's truck rumbled closer, hunting them. Ahead stood the Iron Vultures clubhouse. Iron gates, neon skull sign crackling in the storm. Shadows of dangerous men moving behind fogged windows. Eli had been taught his whole life that bikers were monsters. But monsters don't cry when they're scared. And right now, standing in freezing rain with his dying sister, Eli was out of choices. He knocked on the devil's door. If you want to know whether Eli made the right choice, stay until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's ride. The knock barely cut through the storm, but inside the clubhouse, 12 pairs of eyes snapped toward the entrance anyway. Ronan Grave Maddox sat at the head of a scarred oak table, leather gloves wrapped around a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched in 20 minutes. Smoke drifted from half-finished cigarettes. The air smelled like motor oil, bourbon, and something darker, the kind of silence that comes before violence or confession. Nobody moved. Outside, the wind shrieked. Rain hammered the tin roof like automatic gunfire. And for a moment, Grave was back in Kandahar, pressed against a convoy wall while mortars screamed overhead. His hands trembled inside the gloves. He clenched his jaw and forced himself back to the present. The knock came again, softer this time, almost apologetic. "Probably cops," muttered Cole, knuckles vein from across the table, his scarred knuckles drumming against wood. Prison tattoos crawled up his neck, disappearing into his collar. "Want me to handle it?" Graves shook his head and stood. His boots echoed across the wooden floor as he crossed the room, each step measured and deliberate. The other bikers watched in silence. Silas Ash Ryder, gray-bearded and quiet as a ghost, leaned back in his chair with unreadable eyes. Jax Reaper Stone cracked his knuckles near the bar. Everyone else stayed perfectly still. Grave reached for the deadbolt, his gloved hand hovering for just a second. Something felt wrong. Cops didn't knock like that. Neither did rivals. He pulled the door open. At first, all he saw was rain, sheets of it, slanting sideways under flickering neon light. Then his eyes dropped, and his breath caught in his throat. A kid stood there, maybe 9 years old, soaking wet, shivering so hard his teeth chattered audibly. His left eye was swollen shut. Blood trickled from a split lip. He wore jeans 3 sizes too big and a torn hoodie that clung to his skinny frame like wet paper. But it was what he held that made Graves' stomach drop. A baby, wrapped in a filthy army blanket, barely visible except for one pale hand and a tuft of dark hair. The blanket rose and fell with shallow, irregular breaths. Eli looked up at Grave with one good eye, terrified, exhausted, desperate, and whispered 5 words that changed everything. "Please, can you hide her?" Grave didn't move, didn't speak. His mind spun through possibilities, threats, complications. This was a setup, had to be. Nobody just showed up at an outlaw clubhouse begging for help unless they were wired. Unless this was some kind of sting operation designed to... The baby coughed. A wet, rattling sound. Eli flinched and pulled her closer, cradling her head with a gentleness that didn't belong to a child his age. His voice cracked when he spoke again. "He's gonna kill her, tonight. I heard him say it." Behind Grave, chairs scraped against wood as the other bikers stood. Ash appeared at his shoulder, silent and steady. Knuckles moved toward the window, eyes scanning the rain-soaked street for threats. Reaper's hand drifted toward the knife on his belt. Grave studied the kid's face, saw the exhaustion carved into features too young to carry it, saw the way his hands shook, not from cold, but from the bone-deep terror of someone who'd already made peace with dying as long as someone else lived. He'd seen that look before. In mirrors. In the eyes of soldiers who threw themselves on grenades. In the faces of men who'd run out of options and kept moving anyway. Graves stepped aside. "Get inside, kid." Eli stumbled through the doorway like a man crossing a finish line he wasn't sure he'd reach. His legs nearly gave out, but he caught himself against the doorframe, still clutching Nova against his chest. Water dripped from his clothes onto the hardwood floor, forming dark puddles that reflected the yellow overhead lights. The clubhouse smelled like leather, cigarette smoke, and something metallic Eli couldn't name. Men surrounded him on all sides, big men with hard faces and tattoos snaking up their arms. Men who looked like the kind of people his stepfather called trash and criminals and animals. Eli's heart hammered. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he was so tired, and Nova's breathing sounded worse. Grave closed the door behind them and locked it with a heavy thud that made Eli jump. When he turned back around, his expression hadn't softened, but something in his eyes had shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or something deeper. "What's your name?" Grave's voice was rough, like gravel under tires. "Eli." His voice came out small. "Eli Mercer." "How old?" "9. "And her?" Grave nodded toward the baby. "Nova. She's 1. Almost 1. Eli swallowed hard. "She's my sister." Ash moved closer, his boots barely making a sound despite his size. He was older than the others, maybe 60, with a gray beard and eyes that had seen too much. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Let me see her." Eli's grip tightened instinctively. Not gonna hurt her, kid." Ash crouched down slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Just need to check if she's okay. Can you let me do that?" Eli looked between Ash and Grave, weighing impossible odds with a 9-year-old's limited understanding of the world. Finally, he nodded and carefully peeled back the soaked blanket. Nova's face appeared, pale, too pale. Her lips had a faint blue tinge. Shallow breaths rattled in her tiny chest, and when Ash gently touched her forehead, he muttered something under his breath that Eli didn't catch. "She's hypothermic," Ash said quietly. "How long you been out in that storm?" "I don't know. Maybe 2 hours? 3? Eli's voice cracked. I had to wait until he passed out. And then the bus didn't come, and I didn't know where else to—" His words dissolved into hitching breaths. He bit down hard on his lip, tasting blood again, fighting to keep control. He couldn't fall apart. Not now. Not when Nova still needed him. Knuckles appeared from somewhere with a stack of clean towels and a wool blanket that smelled like motor oil and soap. "Here, get her wrapped up." Eli accepted the blanket with shaking hands and began rewrapping Nova with the kind of careful precision that spoke of practice. Too much practice for a kid his age. His movements were efficient, methodical, like he'd done this 100 times before. Grave watched in silence. The other bikers formed a loose circle around them, not crowding, just present, waiting. "Who's he?" Grave finally asked. Eli didn't look up. "Wayne, my stepfather." "Where's your mother?" "Dead." The word came out flat, empty. "Car accident 2 years ago." Ash stood slowly, his expression unreadable. "And Wayne's where right now?" "Home. Drinking." Eli finished wrapping Nova and held her close again, rocking slightly. He said she cries too much, that she's broken, that nobody would miss her if she just stopped. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Knuckles' jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. Reaper turned away and braced both hands against the bar, head bowed. Even Ash, who rarely showed emotion, looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Graves' hands curled into fists inside his gloves. Old memories clawed at the edges of his mind, screaming in the dark, the smell of burning flesh, the weight of failure pressing down like a collapsed building. He shoved them back down where they belonged and focused on the kid in front of him. "You got other family?" he asked. Eli shook his head. "Mom was an only child. Her parents died before I was born. Wayne's family doesn't... They don't care." "Social workers?" A bitter laugh escaped Eli's throat, too old, too knowing. "They came once." Wayne cleaned the house, smiled at them, said everything was fine. They believed him. He looked up at Grave with hollow eyes. "Nobody ever believes us." Silence settled over the clubhouse like snow. Outside, the storm raged on. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Somewhere in Blackwater Ridge, Wayne Mercer was probably waking up, realizing his stepchildren were gone, and making plans. Grave exhaled slowly. This was a bad idea. Harboring runaway kids could bring heat the club didn't need. If Wayne reported them missing, Cops would start asking questions. If social services got involved, lawyers would circle. And if the wrong people found out the Iron Vultures were hiding children, it could be used as leverage, as ammunition, as proof that the club was exactly as dangerous as everyone claimed. But when Grave looked at Eli, bruised, exhausted, cradling his baby sister like she was the only thing in the world worth saving, he saw something he recognized. He saw a soldier who'd already decided which hill to die on. "You hungry?" Grave asked. Eli blinked, like the question didn't compute. "What?" "Food. You eaten today?" No, not since yesterday morning." Grave glanced at Knuckles, who nodded and headed toward the kitchen in the back. Then he looked at Ash. "Get a room ready upstairs. Clean sheets, space heater. Grab that portable crib from storage." Ash nodded and disappeared without a word. Eli stared at Grave in disbelief. You're letting us stay?" "For tonight." Grave's voice was firm, uncompromising. "Tomorrow we figure out next steps. But right now, you need food, your sister needs warmth, and both of you need sleep." "I don't have money. Didn't ask for money." "But, kid." Grave crouched down to Eli's eye level, and for the first time, Eli saw past the hard exterior to the exhaustion underneath. This man was tired. Deeply, fundamentally tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "You knocked on our door asking for help. We don't turn away people who need it. Understood?" Eli nodded slowly, tears burning behind his eyes. "Good. Now sit down before you fall down." 20 minutes later, Eli sat at the same scarred oak table where the bikers had been drinking, a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of him that he couldn't quite bring himself to touch. Nova lay in his lap, wrapped in warm blankets, her breathing finally starting to even out. Ash had checked her over with the kind of careful competence that suggested medical training, maybe military, maybe prison, maybe something else entirely. "She'll be okay," Ash had said quietly. "Just needs to warm up and rest." Now Eli watched the bikers move around the clubhouse with practiced efficiency. Knuckles cleaned dishes in the kitchen. Reaper sat near the window, eyes on the street outside. Others drifted in and out, speaking in low voices, their presence both comforting and terrifying. Grave sat across from Eli, nursing his whiskey in silence. His gloves never came off. Eli wondered why. "Why'd you come here?" Grave asked finally. Eli poked at his eggs with a fork. "I didn't know where else to go. Could have gone to the police." "Police won't help." Eli's voice hardened. "They know Wayne. Hoog. He buys them drinks at Murphy's bar downtown, laughs with them. They think he's a good guy." "Could have gone to a church." "Churches close at night." "Hospital." "They'd call social services." Eli looked up, meeting Grave's eyes. "And social services would send us back to him." Grave studied the kid for a long moment. 9 years old, and already he'd learned the hardest lesson life had to offer. The people who were supposed to help couldn't be trusted. "So why us?" Grave pressed. "You know what we are?" "Yeah." Eli's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You're outlaws, criminals, dangerous. And you brought your baby sister to dangerous men." Eli's jaw tightened. "My mom used to say," she said, "the world's full of people who look safe but aren't, and people who look dangerous but are." He swallowed hard. "I took a chance." Something flickered across Grave's face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. He took a slow sip of whiskey and set the glass down with careful precision. "Your mom was right." Behind them, the front door opened. Cold wind rushed in, carrying rain and the smell of wet asphalt. A new biker stepped inside, tall, lean, with a shaved head and a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. He shook water from his leather cut and froze when he saw Eli. "The hell is this?" "Riot," Graves said evenly. "Meet Eli. And Nova." Riot's eyes narrowed. "Since when do we run a daycare?" "Since about 30 minutes ago." "Grave, man, this is not up for discussion." Graves' voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "They stay. Tonight, at minimum. Anyone got a problem with that can take it up with me personally." Silence. Riot looked around the room, reading the expressions of the other bikers. Whatever he saw there made him exhale slowly and shake his head. Your funeral, he muttered, then headed toward the bar. Eli felt Nova stir against his chest. Her tiny hand curled around his finger, and for the first time in hours she made a sound that wasn't a cough, just a soft, sleepy murmur. Relief flooded through him so intensely his eyes burned. Graves stood. Ash will show you upstairs. Get some sleep. What about Wayne? What about him? He's going to come looking. Let him. Graves' expression was unreadable, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He shows up here. We'll have a conversation. Eli wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that maybe, just this once, someone would actually stand between him and the monster who'd been destroying his life piece by piece. But belief was a luxury he'd learned to live without. The room Ash led them to was small but clean. A narrow bed with flannel sheets, a portable crib already set up near a space heater, and a window overlooking the rain-soaked street below. Eli laid Nova in the crib carefully, tucking blankets around her with the precision of someone who'd learned that details mattered, that one mistake could mean everything. She didn't wake, just curled into herself and kept breathing, each breath a small miracle. Ash lingered in the doorway, watching in silence. When Eli finally turned around, the old biker gestured toward the bed. You should sleep too. I can't. Eli's voice was barely audible. What if Wayne finds us? He won't. How do you know? Ash didn't answer right away. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, then moved to the window and looked out at the storm. Rain streaked down the glass in rivers. You know what an outlaw is, kid? Eli hesitated. Someone who breaks the law? That's what people think. Ash turned back toward him. But really, an outlaw is someone the law already broke. Someone the system chewed up and spit out. Someone who learned the hard way that rules don't protect everybody equally. Eli stared at him. Every man downstairs, Ash continued quietly, has been where you are right now. Maybe not exactly, but close enough. We know what it's like when the people who are supposed to help you don't. When you're on your own and everyone else is just waiting for you to disappear. So what changed? We found each other. Ash's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Built something the world told us we didn't deserve. A family that doesn't run on blood or law or any of that bullshit. Just loyalty and protection. Eli wanted to ask more, but exhaustion was pulling at him like gravity. His legs felt weak. His head swam. Ash moved toward the door. Get some sleep. We'll be right downstairs. Anything happens, you yell. Ash? The old biker paused. Why are you helping us? Ash was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades. Because nobody helped me when I needed it, and I've spent 30 years trying to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else. He left without another word, closing the door softly behind him. Eli stood alone in the small room, listening to Nova breathe and the rain hammer the roof. His whole body ached. His mind spun with fear and possibility and a desperate, fragile hope he didn't quite trust yet. He climbed into bed fully clothed and pulled the blankets up to his chin. The sheets smelled like detergent and motor oil, clean but lived in, safe but not soft. Through the walls, he could hear muffled voices downstairs, the low rumble of conversation, the clink of glass on wood, and beneath it all, the distant thunder of Harley engines cooling in the garage. Eli closed his eyes. For the first time in 2 years, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd be okay. Downstairs, Graves stood at the window, smoking a cigarette he'd bummed off Reaper, watching rain turn the neon-lit streets into rivers of colored light. The other bikers had dispersed to various corners of the clubhouse, but the tension in the air hadn't lifted. Knuckles approached from the bar, beer in hand. You know this is gonna blow back on us, he said quietly. Yeah. Cops will come asking questions. Let them. Social services, too. Yep. Knuckles took a long drink. And if Wayne comes looking? Grave exhaled smoke into the darkness. Then we have a problem. You think he will? Wouldn't you? Grave flicked Ash onto the floor. Kid runs off with his baby sister in the middle of the night, shows up at an outlaw clubhouse. Yeah, he'll come. Question is when. Riot wandered over, still looking skeptical. We're not kidnappers, Grave. We can't just... We're not kidnapping anyone. Grave's voice was ice. Kid came to us asking for help. We're providing temporary shelter while we figure out next steps. Next steps being what exactly? Don't know yet. Fantastic plan. Grave turned to face Riot fully, and something in his expression made the younger biker take a half step back. You got kids, Riot? No. Then you don't get it. Grave ground out his cigarette on the windowsill. That boy upstairs is 9 years old, and he's already learned that the entire world would rather look the other way than help him. You know what that does to a kid? What kind of man that creates? Riot said nothing. We turned them away, Grave continued. We're just one more door that slammed in his face. One more adult who chose comfort over courage. And I've got enough blood on my hands without adding that to the pile. Silence settled over the group. Outside, lightning split the sky. Ash appeared from the back hallway, hands in his pockets. Kid's asleep, baby too. Good. Grave rubbed his face with gloved hands. Tomorrow we start making calls, lawyers, social workers we actually trust. Anyone who can help navigate this mess legally. And if there's no legal option? Knuckles asked. Grave met his eyes. Then we get creative. The room went quiet again. Every man present understood what creative meant in their world. It meant bending rules, breaking them, operating in the gray spaces where law and morality didn't quite align. It meant becoming the kind of men society feared. But sometimes, Grave thought, fear was just another word for power. And power in the right hands could mean the difference between a kid dying alone in the rain and a kid waking up warm and safe. Reaper spoke up from his post near the window. Heads up, we got movement. Everyone turned. A black pickup truck rolled slowly down the street, headlights cutting through the rain. It slowed as it passed the clubhouse, and for a moment the driver was visible through the windshield. Mid-40s, heavy-set, with a hard face and cold eyes. Wayne Mercer. He didn't stop, just kept driving, slow and deliberate, like a predator circling territory. Graves' jaw tightened. Riot, Reaper, take shifts on watch tonight. 2-hour rotations. Anyone approaches the clubhouse, I want to know about it. Both men nodded. Knuckles, start making calls. Wake up anyone who might have legal connections. I want options by morning. On it. Ash. Grave hesitated. Stay close to the kid. He trusts you. Ash gave a slight nod and disappeared back toward the stairs. Grave stood alone at the window, watching the taillights of Wayne's truck fade into the storm. This was going to get ugly. He could feel it in his bones, that same instinct that had kept him alive through 2 tours in Afghanistan and a decade of outlaw life. The kind of trouble that didn't resolve with handshakes and paperwork. The kind that left bodies behind. But when he thought about Eli's bruised face and Nova's rattling breath, and the desperate hope in a 9-year-old's eyes, Grave knew one thing with absolute certainty. He'd burn the whole damn city down before he let that man touch those kids again. Outside, thunder rolled across Blackwater Ridge like a warning, and in the darkness, engines began to stir. Dawn broke over Blackwater Ridge like a bruise, purple and gray, bleeding into the edges of a sky that promised nothing good. Grave hadn't slept. He sat in the same chair by the window where he'd spent the night, leather gloves still on, watching the street slowly come alive with early morning traffic. His whiskey glass sat empty on the sill. Cigarette butts littered the floor around his boots. Behind him, the clubhouse creaked and groaned as the other bikers began to stir. Someone coughed in the back room. Pipes rattled as a shower turned on upstairs. The smell of stale smoke and old coffee hung in the air like a funeral shroud. Graves' hands trembled inside the gloves. He pressed them flat against his thighs and counted backwards from 10, focusing on his breathing the way the VA counselor had taught him years ago. It didn't help. Nothing ever helped. The black pickup truck had circled 3 more times during the night, each pass slower than the last. Wayne Mercer was hunting, and he knew exactly where his prey had gone. Footsteps on the stairs pulled Grave from his thoughts. He turned to see Eli descending carefully, one hand on the railing, moving like someone who'd learned to be silent in a house where noise meant danger. The kid wore the same clothes from last night, still damp, still torn. His swollen eye had darkened to deep purple. Nova? Grave asked. Still sleeping. Eli reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped, uncertain. Is it Is it okay if I'm down here? It's your house, same as ours right now. Eli nodded slowly, but didn't move closer. He stood in the shadows near the stairwell, watching Grave with the wariness of an animal that had been kicked too many times. Grave understood that look. Wore it himself most days. You hungry? A little. Knuckles is making breakfast. Should be ready soon. Grave paused. We need to talk, though, about next steps. Something flickered across Eli's face. Fear, maybe, or resignation. You're sending us back. No. Then what? Grave gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down, kid. Eli crossed the room slowly and sat, perching on the edge of the seat like he might need to run at any moment. His eyes never left Grave's face. We made some calls last night, Grave began. Reached out to a lawyer we know, woman named Patricia Vance. She handles cases like yours, custody disputes, abuse allegations, that kind of thing. And she's willing to meet with us this afternoon. Hear your story, see what legal options exist. Eli's jaw tightened. Legal options didn't work before. That was before you had representation. We don't have money for a lawyer. Didn't ask for money. Grave leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Listen to me, Eli. What you did last night, running through a storm with your baby sister, asking strangers for help, that took guts. But guts only get you so far. Eventually you need a plan. Strategy. People who know how to fight the system from the inside. The system doesn't care about kids like us. You're right, it doesn't. Graves' voice hardened. Which is why you need people who know how to make it care. Patricia's good. She's gotten kids out of worse situations than yours. Eli stared at him for a long moment, searching for the lie, the catch, the hidden price. When he didn't find one, his shoulders sagged slightly. What if it doesn't work? Then we try something else. Like what? Grave held his gaze. Whatever it takes. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them spelled out. Eli was 9 years old, but he wasn't stupid. He knew what whatever it takes meant in a world where outlaw bikers offered protection. Before either could speak again, the front door banged open. Cold wind rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. Riot stomped inside, water dripping from his cut, his face carved from stone. We got a problem. Grave stood immediately. Wayne? Worse. Cops. Two patrol cars sat idling at the curb outside the clubhouse, their lights off, but their presence unmistakable. Grave watched them through the window while the other bikers gathered behind him in tense silence. Knuckles cracked his knuckles. Reaper's hand drifted toward the knife on his belt. Ash stood near the stairs, positioning himself between the front door and Eli. How long they been out there? Grave asked. 10 minutes, Riot said. Just sitting, watching? They approach? Not yet. Grave exhaled slowly. This was exactly what he'd feared. Wayne had made his move, but instead of coming himself, he'd sent the law to do his dirty work. Eli, Grave said without turning around. Go upstairs, stay with Nova, don't come down until I tell you. But now. The command in Grave's voice left no room for argument. Eli fled up the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Knuckles moved to Grave's side. What's the play? We talk to them. Keep it civil. Don't give them a reason to escalate. And if they want to come inside? They got a warrant? Doubt it. Then they stay outside. Grave's jaw tightened. We're not criminals, just citizens exercising our right to privacy. Riot snorted. Yeah, 'cause that's gonna fly. It'll fly because it has to. Grave turned to face his brothers. Listen up. Nobody gets hostile. Nobody makes threats. We're respectful, cooperative, and we give them absolutely nothing. Understood? A chorus of reluctant nods. Grave grabbed his leather cut from the back of a chair and shrugged it on, the weight of it settling across his shoulders like armor. He pulled on his gloves, habit, ritual, necessity, and headed for the door. Outside, the morning was cold and damp. Mist clung to the streets like breath. The two patrol cars sat silent and menacing, their occupants watching through tinted windows. Grave stopped at the edge of the curb and waited. The driver's door of the first car opened. A cop stepped out, late 40s, soft around the middle, with a mustache that had gone out of style 20 years ago. His name tag read Mitchell. He hooked his thumbs into his belt and approached with the casual arrogance of someone who believed he owned the street. "Morning, Grave." "Officer Mitchell?" "Hell of a night, huh? Storm kept me up." "That right?" Mitchell smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Got a call this morning. Wayne Mercer. Says his kids are missing. Says he thinks they might have run off scared during the storm. Wanted to know if anyone had seen them." Graves' expression didn't change. "That's so?" "Yeah. Funny thing is, Wayne mentioned he saw your clubhouse lit up late last night. Thought maybe, someone here might have seen something." "We were up late, so what?" "So I'm asking if you've seen two kids. Boy about 9. Baby girl, maybe a year old." Grave met Mitchell's eyes without flinching. "Haven't seen anyone matching that description." It was technically true. He'd seen Eli and Nova, but Mitchell had asked if he'd seen two kids in the abstract, not specifically Eli and Nova. Semantic games, but games that could buy time. Mitchell's smile widened. "You sure about that?" "Positive." "Mind if we take a look around? Just to be thorough." "You got a warrant?" The smile vanished. "Don't need a warrant if you're cooperative. Don't need to be cooperative if you don't have a warrant." Grave kept his voice level, respectful. "We're private citizens on private property. You want to search the place, come back with paper." Mitchell's face darkened. "You know what I think, Grave? I think you're hiding something." "Think whatever you want. Doesn't change the law." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Behind Grave, the other bikers had filed out onto the porch. A silent wall of leather and tattoos, arms crossed, expressions unreadable. A show of force without a single word spoken. Mitchell glanced past Grave at the assembled iron vultures, calculating odds and consequences. Whatever he saw there made him take a step back. "Wayne's a good man," Mitchell said quietly. "Lost his wife, trying to raise two kids on his own. If they're out there somewhere, scared and alone, they need to come home." "If I see anyone matching that description," Grave said, "I'll be sure to let you know." Mitchell's jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be my first." The cop stared at him for another moment, then turned and stalked back to his patrol car. Both vehicles pulled away from the curb with deliberate slowness, their message clear. "We're watching." When the sound of engines faded, Grave turned to find his brothers still standing on the porch. "Well," Riot said flatly, "that went great." Inside the clubhouse, tension coiled like a spring ready to snap. Grave paced while the others sat in heavy silence. Eli had crept back downstairs and now sat curled in the corner near the fireplace, arms wrapped around his knees, watching everything with wide eyes. "They'll be back," Knuckles said, "with a warrant next time." "Maybe." Graves stopped pacing. "Or maybe they're fishing. Wayne makes accusations. Cops go through the motions. Nothing comes of it." "You believe that?" "No." Riot leaned against the bar, arms crossed. "So what's the plan? We can't hide two kids indefinitely. Eventually someone's going to talk, or Wayne's going to push harder, or we do what we said we'd do." Graves' voice cut through the speculation. "Get them legal help, build a case. Do this the right way." "The right way?" Riot laughed bitterly. "When's the right way ever worked for people like us?" "It's worked before." "When? Name one time the system sided with outlaws over respectable citizens." Grave opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. Because Riot had a point. The Iron Vultures existed precisely because the system had failed every single man in this room. They'd built their own code, their own justice, their own version of family because society had offered them nothing. But that didn't mean they should abandon the attempt. "We try legal first," Grave said finally. "If that doesn't work, then what?" Riot pushed off the bar. "We go to war with a guy who's got cops in his pocket?" "Smart, Grave. Real smart." "You got a better idea?" "Yeah, we put the kids on a bus to another state. Get them far away from here. Let them disappear." Eli flinched like he'd been slapped. Grave's eyes narrowed. "That's your solution? Send two traumatized kids into the world alone? Better than getting us all arrested trying to play hero. We're not playing anything." "Aren't we?" Riot stepped closer, his voice rising. You know what's going to happen, Grave? Wayne's going to lawyer up. He's going to paint us as kidnappers, as dangerous criminals who brainwashed two innocent kids. And the cops, the courts, the media, they're all going to eat it up, because that's the story they want to believe. So we let him win? I'm saying we pick battles we can actually win. Riot gestured toward Eli. This kid showed up here looking for a miracle. But we're not miracle workers. We're outlaws. And sooner or later, that's going to matter more than anything we do to help. Silence crashed over the room. Graves stared at Riot, his hands curling into fists inside his gloves. Part of him wanted to throw a punch to shut down this line of thinking before it infected the others. But another part, the part that had survived 2 tours in hell and a decade of outlaw life, knew Riot wasn't entirely wrong. They were outlaws. The system didn't trust them, and anything they did to help Eli and Nova could be twisted into something dark and criminal. But that didn't mean they should do nothing. Meeting's in 3 hours, Graves said quietly. Patricia Vance, she's expecting us. And if she says there's no legal option? Then we cross that bridge when we get there. Riot shook his head in disgust and stalked toward the door. This is a mistake. And when it blows up in our faces, don't say I didn't warn you. He slammed the door behind him, leaving silence in his wake. Knuckles cleared his throat. He's got a point, Grave, even if he's being a dick about it. I know. So why are we doing this? Grave looked at Eli, small, scared, clutching his knees like they were the only thing holding him together. The kid stared back with hollow eyes that had already seen too much. Because nobody else will, Grave said. Tapuats. Patricia Vance's office sat on the 3rd floor of a rundown building downtown, sandwiched between a bail bondsman and a pawn shop. The elevator didn't work, so Grave climbed the stairs with Ash at his side and Eli trailing behind. Nova stayed at the clubhouse with Knuckles, who'd volunteered to play babysitter with the kind of gentle competence that surprised everyone who didn't know him. The office itself was small and cluttered, stacks of legal files piled on every surface, a desk buried under paperwork, diplomas on the wall next to photographs of Patricia with various kids she'd presumably helped over the years. The woman herself was mid-50s, black, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie and seen every trick. She gestured for them to sit. Mr. Maddox. Her voice was crisp, professional. Silas. And this must be Eli. Eli nodded silently. Patricia folded her hands on her desk. I understand you're in a difficult situation. Tell me what happened. Eli glanced at Grave, who nodded encouragement. Slowly, haltingly, the kid began to talk. He described his mother's death, Wayne's escalating violence, the night he'd grabbed Nova and run. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When Eli finished, she set down her pen and studied him carefully. You're very brave, she said. Not many kids would have done what you did. Eli said nothing. Patricia turned to Grave. And you took them in. For 1 night, maybe longer, depending on what options exist. Options? Patricia leaned back in her chair. Let me be blunt. Your situation is complicated. Wayne Mercer has legal custody. He hasn't been convicted of any crimes. And while Eli's testimony carries weight, it's still the word of a 9-year-old against an adult with no prior record. He nearly killed Nova when she was a baby, Eli said suddenly. That's why he went to prison. I read the file. Patricia's expression softened. But he served his time. And when he got out, the court deemed him rehabilitated. That's the legal reality we're working with. Graves' jaw tightened. So what are you saying? I'm saying this is going to be a fight. We'll need to file for emergency custody, compile evidence of ongoing abuse, possibly get testimony from neighbors, teachers, anyone who can corroborate Eli's account. It could take weeks, maybe months. We don't have months, Graves said. Wayne knows where the kids are. Cops have already come sniffing around. Patricia nodded grimly. Which brings me to the other problem. Your involvement. What about it? You're an outlaw motorcycle club. Wayne's lawyer, and he will get a lawyer, is going to paint you as dangerous criminals who kidnapped 2 children. The optics are terrible. We didn't kidnap anyone? I know, but that's not how it'll play in court. Patricia tapped her pen against the legal pad. The best thing you can do is step back. Let me work with social services to find temporary foster placement while we build the case. Eli's head snapped up. No. Eli, no. His voice cracked. I'm not going to another foster home. I'm not going back into the system. They'll just send us back to Wayne or split us up or... I understand your fear, Patricia said gently, but you don't understand anything. Eli stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Nobody understands. The system doesn't protect kids like us. It protects people like Wayne, people who smile and lie and know exactly what to say to make everyone believe them. Eli. Graves' voice was firm but not harsh. Sit down. No, I'm done listening to adults tell me what's best when they have no idea. Sit down. Something in Graves' tone made Eli freeze. Slowly he lowered himself back into the chair, trembling with anger and fear. Grave turned to Patricia. What if we became licensed foster parents? Patricia blinked. Excuse me? The club. What if we went through the process, got certified? Mr. Maddox, that's not how it works. Why not? Because you're a motorcycle club. Because half your members probably have criminal records. Because the state isn't going to hand over custody of 2 children to what? Grave leaned forward. To men who served their country, who've built a community, who showed up when nobody else would. Patricia held his gaze. I admire what you're trying to do, truly. But the system doesn't see it that way. Then the system's broken. Yes, Patricia agreed quietly. It is. Silence settled over the office. Outside, traffic hummed. A siren wailed in the distance. Eli stared at the floor, his hands clenched into fists. Ash spoke for the first time since they'd arrived. What if we don't play by the system's rules? Patricia's eyes narrowed. I can't advise you to do anything illegal. Didn't ask for advice, asked a hypothetical. Then hypothetically, Patricia said carefully, if 2 children were to disappear from the area entirely, say, relocated to another state with new identities, it would be very difficult for anyone to find them. Hypothetically. Graves studied her. You're suggesting we run. I'm suggesting that sometimes the legal system fails. And when it does, people make difficult choices. And if we're caught, then you go to prison for kidnapping, and those children end up right back where they started. Patricia's expression was grave. But if you're not caught, if they disappear into a life where Wayne Mercer can never touch them again, then maybe they get a chance most kids in their situation never do. The weight of that possibility hung in the air like smoke. Grave looked at Eli. What do you want, kid? Eli's voice was barely a whisper. I want Nova to be safe. That's not what I asked. What do you want? Eli met his eyes. I want to stay with you. Something cracked inside Graves' chest. Some wall he'd built years ago to keep the world at a manageable distance. He saw himself in this kid, saw the desperation, the exhaustion, the bone-deep need for someone, anyone, to just show up and stay. Okay, Graves said. Patricia stood. Think about what I said. Both options, legal and otherwise. But decide quickly, because Wayne's not going to wait, and neither will the law. The ride back to the clubhouse was silent. Ash drove his pickup truck while Graves sat in the passenger seat and Eli huddled in the back, staring out the window at the gray streets of Blackwater Ridge. Rain had started again, light but persistent, turning everything slick and cold. Graves' mind churned with impossible calculations. Run or fight. Hide or confront. Break the law to save 2 kids, or trust a system that had already failed them once. There were no good options, just degrees of bad. When they pulled up to the clubhouse, something was wrong. Grave felt it immediately, a shift in the air, a tension that hadn't been there before. The front door stood ajar. Harleys were parked at odd angles in the lot, like they'd been abandoned in a hurry. He was out of the truck before Ash even cut the engine. Inside, chaos. Knuckles stood in the middle of the room with Nova crying in his arms, surrounded by half the club. Reaper paced near the window. Riot stood by the bar with his arms crossed, his expression dark. And in the center of it all stood a woman Grave didn't recognize, late 30s, wearing a cheap suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held the cold assessment of someone used to delivering bad news. Mr. Maddox, she said, I'm Janet Morrison, Child Protective Services. Graves' blood turned to ice. Wayne Mercer filed a formal complaint this morning, Morrison continued, alleging that his children were unlawfully removed from his custody and are currently being harbored at this location. I'm here to investigate. Eli appeared at Graves' side, his face pale. Morrison's eyes landed on him immediately. Eli Mercer? Eli said nothing. I need you to come with me, sweetheart. You and your sister. We're going to make sure you're safe. I am safe, Eli said. His voice shook but held firm. I'm safe here. Morrison's expression softened with practiced sympathy. I understand this is confusing, but your father is very worried about you. He's not my father. Your legal guardian, then. Either way, I'm required by law to return you to his custody pending a full investigation. No. Eli backed toward Grave. I'm not going back. Sweetheart, I'm not going back to him. He'll kill Nova. He said so. I heard him. Morrison sighed. These are very serious allegations, and they will be investigated thoroughly. But in the meantime, I have a court order. She pulled a document from her briefcase and held it up. You need to come with me, both of you. Graves stepped forward. Let me see that. Morrison handed it over. Graves scanned the legalese, his heart sinking with every line. Emergency custody order. Immediate return to legal guardian. Effective immediately. It was over. The law had spoken, and the law said Wayne Mercer got his children back. Grave looked at Eli, saw the terror in his eyes, saw 9 years of trauma and survival instinct screaming at him to run, to fight, to do anything except surrender. Then Grave looked at his brothers, Knuckles holding Nova, Ash standing silent and solid, Reaper with his hand on his knife. Even Riot, despite his earlier objections, looked ready to burn the world down. And Grave understood, in that crystalline moment of perfect clarity, that they'd reached the point of no return. They could comply. Hand over the kids, trust the system to eventually, maybe, possibly, do the right thing, or they could fight. Not with fists, not yet, but with defiance, with refusal, with the kind of principled stubbornness that had defined outlaw culture since the first biker ever told authority to go to hell. Gray folded the court order carefully and handed it back to Morrison. No, he said. Morrison blinked. Excuse me? I said no. The kids stay here. Mr. Maddox, I have a legal... I don't care what you have. Graves' voice was quiet, deadly. Those children came to us asking for protection. We gave it. And we're not handing them over to a man who's going to hurt them just because a piece of paper says we should. Morrison's expression hardened. If you refuse to comply, I'll have no choice but to call the police. Then call them. You'll be arrested, charged with kidnapping, obstruction, possibly worse. Wouldn't be my first time in cuffs. Morrison stared at him in disbelief. Behind her, Eli started to cry. Not the loud, dramatic crying of a child throwing a tantrum, but the silent, devastating tears of someone who'd run out of hope and found it again in the most unexpected place. Knuckles shifted Nova in his arms. We're with you, Grave. Ash nodded. All the way. Even Riot, after a long moment of silence, uncrossed his arms. Hell with it. Let's make it interesting. Morrison looked around the room at the assembled bikers, men with scars and tattoos and eyes that had seen the worst humanity had to offer, men who'd spent their lives learning when to bend and when to break. This was a break moment. You're making a terrible mistake, Morrison said. Grave met her eyes. Story of my life. Morrison pulled out her phone and dialed. This is Morrison. I need police at 447 Industrial Way. Immediately. I have a custody situation that's turned hostile. She hung up and looked at Grave. You have about 5 minutes before this gets very complicated. Then I guess we better talk fast. Grave crouched down to Eli's level. Listen to me, kid. Things are about to get ugly. Cops are coming. They're going to try to take you and Nova, and we're going to do everything we can to stop that. Grave, but I need you to understand something. Grave gripped Eli's shoulders. There's a chance we lose. A chance they drag you out of here anyway. If that happens, I need you to be smart. Keep your head down. Don't fight them. And know that we're not giving up. We're just changing tactics. Eli nodded, tears streaming down his face. But there's also a chance we win, Grave continued. A chance we hold the line long enough for Patricia to work some legal magic. A chance the story gets out and people start asking questions the cops can't ignore. It's a long shot, but it's the only shot we've got. What do I do? You stay behind me, and you trust that we've got you. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Grave stood and faced his brothers. Anybody wants to walk away, now's the time. This goes sideways, we're all going down. Nobody moved. Outside, patrol cars screeched to a halt in front of the clubhouse. Doors slammed. Voices shouted commands. Grave walked to the window and looked out at the assembled police force. 6 cars, maybe 20 officers, all with hands on their weapons. This was it. The moment everything changed, he turned back to his brothers, to Eli, to Nova, still crying in Knuckles' arms, and he made his choice. Nobody goes through that door, Grave said quietly. Not while we're still standing. The front door burst open. Cops flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting commands that blurred into white noise. And the Iron Vultures stood their ground. The standoff lasted 47 seconds. Grave counted each one in his head, while 20 cops flooded the clubhouse with weapons drawn, barking commands that overlapped into meaningless noise. Behind him, his brothers formed a wall, arms crossed, faces carved from stone. Not a single man reaching for a weapon, but not a single man backing down either. Eli pressed against Grave's back, small hands clutching leather. Nova's crying cut through the chaos like a siren. Officer Mitchell pushed to the front, his earlier politeness gone. Everybody on the ground, now! Nobody moved. I said on the ground! Grave's voice cut through the shouting. We're not armed, we're not resisting, but we're not getting on the ground either. Mitchell's face flushed red. You're harboring children unlawfully removed from legal custody. That's kidnapping. Kid came to us asking for help. Don't care. Get on the ground or I will put you there. The air crackled with potential violence. 20 guns versus 12 unarmed men. The math was simple. The outcome inevitable. But Grave had learned in Afghanistan that some battles weren't about winning. They were about making the cost high enough that victory felt like defeat. You want these kids? Grave asked quietly. You're going to have to go through us. All of us. And every second of what happens next is going to be on camera. He nodded toward Ash, who held up his phone, recording. Mitchell's eyes narrowed. Turn that off. Public property. First Amendment. Ash didn't lower the phone. Smile for the internet, officer. For a moment, Mitchell wavered. Grave could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Use of force against unarmed citizens, with children present, all captured on video. The kind of incident that made national news and ended careers. But then Janet Morrison stepped forward, her voice calm and professional. Mr. Maddox, nobody wants violence. We just want to ensure the children's safety. They're safe here. That's not your determination to make. She held up the court order again. This is a lawful order signed by a judge. You can comply peacefully, or you can be arrested and the children removed by force. Those are your options. Grave looked down at Eli. The kid stared up at him with eyes that had already died 1,000 small deaths, waiting for the next betrayal, the next adult who promised protection and delivered abandonment. Something ancient and primal stirred in Grave's chest. The same instinct that had made him throw himself on a grenade in Kandahar to save his squad. The same bone-deep certainty that some lines couldn't be uncrossed. He'd already decided. Then arrest me, Grave said. Arrest all of us. But you're not taking those kids. Morrison sighed. Officer Mitchell, please proceed with... The lights went out. Every bulb in the clubhouse died simultaneously, plunging the room into darkness, broken only by the gray morning light filtering through windows. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then chaos erupted. Cops shouted. Flashlights clicked on, slicing through the darkness. Someone grabbed Grave's arm. Knuckles, his voice urgent in the dark. Back door. Now. Grave didn't question. He swept Eli up with one arm and followed Knuckles through the blackness, navigating by memory. Behind them, cops crashed into furniture. Morrison's voice rang out, demanding someone find the breaker. They burst through the back door into the alley behind the clubhouse. Cold rain hit Grave's face. 3 Harleys sat waiting, engines already running, Reaper at the controls of one. "Go!" Reaper shouted. Ash appeared from the darkness with Nova clutched against his chest, wrapped in his leather cut. He swung onto the second bike. Knuckles took the third. Grave threw Eli onto the back of Reaper's Harley. "Hold on tight. Don't let go for anything." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." Grave looked at Reaper. "Get him to the cabin. Don't stop for anything." Reaper's eyes held a question, but he nodded and gunned the engine. The Harley roared to life, tearing down the alley with Eli clinging to Reaper's back. Ash followed with Nova. Knuckles brought up the rear. Grave turned back toward the clubhouse. Inside, the lights flickered back on. Cops poured into the alley, weapons raised, shouting for him to freeze. He raised his hand slowly. "Looking for me?" Mitchell slammed him against the brick wall, wrenching his arms behind his back. Metal cuffs bit into his wrists, cold, familiar, inevitable. Other cops rushed past, chasing the sound of Harleys, but the bikes were already gone, swallowed by Blackwater Ridge's maze of back streets. Morrison appeared in the doorway, her professional composure cracked. "Where are they?" Graves smiled. "No idea what you're talking about." But Mitchell yanked him around. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." "Doubt it." They dragged him toward a patrol car while rain hammered down and sirens wailed in the distance. As Mitchell shoved him into the back seat, Grave caught a glimpse of the clubhouse. His home. His sanctuary, now crawling with cops tearing the place apart. The door slammed shut. The car pulled away. And Grave sat in silence, hands cuffed behind his back, watching Blackwater Ridge disappear through rain-streaked windows. He'd just declared war on the entire system. Now he had to pray his brothers could finish what he'd started. The cabin sat 40 miles north of Blackwater Ridge, buried in pine forests so deep that cell service was a memory, and the nearest neighbor was a logging operation 3 miles west. Ash had bought it with cash years ago under a fake name, one of several bolt holes the club maintained for situations exactly like this. Reaper killed the Harley's engine and silence crashed over them like a wave. Rain drummed on the cabin's tin roof. Wind shook the trees. Eli slid off the bike, his legs nearly buckling, and stared at the small structure. Weathered wood, dark windows, a chimney that wasn't smoking. It looked abandoned, forgotten, safe. Ash pulled up beside them with Nova still wrapped in his cut. Knuckles arrived seconds later, immediately scanning the tree line with the paranoid efficiency of someone who'd done hard time. "Inside," Ash said quietly. "Fast." The cabin's interior smelled like old wood and dust. Furniture sat covered in sheets. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. Windows on all sides offered clear sight lines to approaching threats. Ash laid Nova on a couch and began unwrapping her carefully. The baby had stopped crying somewhere during the ride, lulled into exhausted sleep by motion and engine rumble. Her breathing had evened out. Color had returned to her cheeks. Eli stood in the doorway, dripping water onto hardwood, his body shaking so hard his teeth rattled. Knuckles grabbed a blanket from a closet and wrapped it around the kid's shoulders. "You okay?" Eli nodded, but his eyes told a different story. He looked like someone who'd just survived a car crash, still processing, still waiting for the next impact. Reaper secured the door and moved to a window, eyes on the dirt road leading to the cabin. "How long before they find us?" "Depends." Ash lit the fireplace with practiced efficiency. "Cops don't know about this place, but if Wayne's got connections we don't know about, could be hours, could be days. What? Could be never," Knuckles added. "No paper trail, no digital footprint. Far as the world knows, this cabin doesn't exist." Eli's voice came out small. "What about Grave?" The 3 bikers exchanged glances. "Grave did what he had to do," Ash said carefully. "Bought you time. By getting arrested. By making a choice." Ash turned from the fireplace, flames casting shadows across his scarred face. "Sometimes the only way to win is to make sure the other side loses worse than you." "I don't understand." Knuckles crouched down to Eli's eye level. "You ever play chess, kid?" "No." "Well, in chess, sometimes you sacrifice your most important piece to protect the king. Grave just put himself in check so you and Nova could get to safety." "But he's in jail." "For now." Reaper's voice was cold. "But Grave's been arrested before. He knows how to handle it. What matters is you're out of reach. Wayne can't touch you here. Eli looked between the three men, strangers who'd become protectors in less than 24 hours, outlaws who'd risked everything for kids they barely knew. His mind couldn't process it, couldn't reconcile the world he'd known, where adults hurt and abandoned and lied, with this new reality where dangerous men threw themselves between children in harm without hesitation. "Why?" Eli whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Ash was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled off his leather cut and showed Eli the back, the Iron Vulture's patch, the rocker, the symbols earned through blood and loyalty. "You see this?" Eli nodded. "This means family, not the kind you're born into, the kind you build, the kind you choose." Ash put the cut back on. "Every man wearing this patch has been where you are right now. Maybe not exactly, but close enough, scared, alone, failed by people who should have protected us. So you help kids? We help anyone who needs it, when we can, how we can." Ash's expression hardened, "And we don't let monsters win, ever." Outside, thunder rumbled, rain intensified, hammering the roof like artillery. Knuckles stood and moved to the kitchen area, rummaging through cabinets. "You hungry, kid?" Eli realized he was starving. "Yeah." "Good, 'cause you're gonna eat, then sleep. We'll figure out next steps when you've got some rest." But as Knuckles pulled out canned soup and crackers, Eli's mind churned with questions he couldn't articulate. What happened now? How long could they hide? What about Grave? What about Wayne? And beneath all of it, the terrifying question he didn't want to face. What if this was just delaying the inevitable? Opon. Blackwater Ridge Police Station smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Grave sat in an interrogation room with his hands cuffed to a metal table, waiting. He'd been here 3 hours. Nobody had spoken to him, except to read him his rights and take his fingerprints. Standard procedure. Soften him up. Let him stew. He'd seen it before. Hell, he'd taught this exact technique to Iraqi police during his second tour. Isolation. Silence. The slow psychological pressure of not knowing what came next. It didn't work on him then. Wouldn't work now. The door finally opened. But instead of Mitchell or Morrison, a man Grave didn't recognize stepped inside. Late 50s, expensive suit, the kind of polished appearance that screamed lawyer or politician. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with the confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. He sat down across from Grave without introducing himself. "Mr. Maddox, I'm going to be very direct with you."
Lita sama sebuam.
Some kids. His voice was smooth, professional. "You're in serious trouble. Kidnapping, obstruction, resisting arrest. You're looking at 10 to 15 years minimum." Graves said nothing, "But I'm here to offer you a way out." The man opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. "Wayne Mercer is a reasonable man. He doesn't want to see you rot in prison. He just wants his children back. He's not their father. Legally, he is." The man slid the document across the table. "This is a statement. You sign it, admit you acted impulsively out of misguided concern, and tell us where the children are currently located. In exchange, Mr. Mercer agrees not to press charges. You walk out of here today." Grave looked at the paper without touching it. "And the kids?" "Return to their legal guardian, where they belong. Where they'll die." The man's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation, one you'll need to prove in court. But for now, we're talking about your freedom, your future, your club." Something in the way he said "your club" made Graves' instincts flare. "What about my club?" The man leaned back. "The Iron Vultures operate in a legal gray area. You know it, I know it. Most of the time, law enforcement looks the other way because you keep to yourselves. But this situation has drawn attention, federal attention. You're not a cop. No, I'm an attorney representing several interested parties who would prefer this situation resolved quietly." The man steepled his fingers. "Sign the statement, tell us where the children are, and life goes back to normal. Refuse, and I guarantee the full weight of federal investigation lands on the Iron Vultures. RICO charges, asset forfeiture, every member of your club in federal prison." There it was. The real threat. Grave met the man's eyes. Who are you really? Does it matter? It does to me. The man smiled faintly. Let's just say Wayne Mercer has friends. Powerful friends who don't appreciate motorcycle clubs interfering in private family matters. Private family matters. Grave's voice was ice. That what you call child abuse these days? I call it none of your business. Kid showed up at my door asking for help. That makes it my business. A child's accusations are not evidence. And even if they were, you had no legal authority to intervene. You're not law enforcement. You're not social services. You're a criminal with a savior complex. Graves' hands curled into fists beneath the table. I'm done talking. The man stood smoothly. Think carefully, Mr. Maddox. You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, the offer expires and we proceed with full prosecution of you and every member of your organization. He left the document on the table and walked out. Graves stared at it in the empty room. The words blurred together. His mind raced through possibilities, strategies, outcomes. They were playing for keeps now. Wayne's powerful friends were willing to burn the entire club to get 2 kids back, which meant this wasn't about Eli and Nova at all. This was about something bigger. Caught. At the cabin, night fell like a curtain. Eli had eaten, changed into dry clothes Knuckles had pulled from storage, and now sat by the fireplace watching Nova sleep in a makeshift crib fashioned from blankets and couch cushions. The baby's chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Ash sat in a chair near the window, cleaning a pistol with methodical precision. Reaper paced the perimeter outside, his boots crunching on wet gravel. Knuckles had disappeared into a back room to make phone calls on a burner phone. The cabin was warm, safe, quiet. But Eli couldn't relax. What happens tomorrow? He asked. Ash didn't look up from the pistol. We wait for word from Grave. What if he can't call? Then we wait longer. And if Wayne finds us? Now Ash looked up. His eyes were ancient, tired. Then we deal with it. Eli wanted to ask how. Wanted to know what deal with it meant when cops and lawyers and powerful men with unknown agendas were hunting them. But he was too exhausted to form the words. Knuckles emerged from the back room, his expression grim. We got a problem. Ash set down the pistol. What kind? Just got off the phone with our contact at the courthouse. Wayne Mercer filed an emergency motion. Judge granted it an hour ago. What kind of motion? Full media blitz, press conference scheduled for tomorrow morning. Wayne's going to go on TV, play the grieving father whose children were kidnapped by a dangerous biker gang. Silence crashed over the cabin. Eli's stomach dropped. No. Gets worse, Knuckles continued. He's got backing. Some non-profit organization called Families First Foundation. They're funding his legal team, coordinating with media, turning this into a national story. What the hell is Families First Foundation? Ash asked. Front organization. Has to be. Knuckles pulled out his phone and showed them a website. Look at their donor list, shell companies, anonymous contributions. This thing reeks of money laundering. Reaper came inside, stomping water from his boots. We got headlights. Half-mile out. Everyone froze. Ash was on his feet instantly, grabbing the pistol. How many vehicles? 1. Moving slow. Cops? Can't tell. Knuckles killed the lights. Darkness swallowed the cabin. Eli's heart hammered so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. He scrambled to Nova's crib and crouched beside it, ready to grab her and run. Ash moved to the window, peering through a crack in the curtains. The headlights grew closer, painting trees in harsh white light. The vehicle slowed as it approached the cabin's driveway, then stopped. Can you see who it is? Knuckles whispered. Not yet. The driver's door opened. A figure stepped out, tall, lean, wearing a leather cut, visible even in the darkness. Riot. Ash exhaled. Stand down. It's one of ours. But something in his voice suggested he wasn't entirely relieved. Riot approached the cabin slowly, hands visible, making no sudden moves. When he reached the door, he knocked twice. A specific rhythm the club used to identify friendlies. Reaper opened the door. The hell are you doing here? Came to warn you. Riot stepped inside, water streaming from his cut. His face was carved from granite. We're compromised. How? Patricia Vance, the lawyer, she sold us out. The room went cold. Bullshit, Knuckles said. She's been helping families for 20 years. Yeah, and someone got to her. Riot pulled out his phone and showed them a photo. Patricia Vance sitting in an expensive restaurant with the same well-dressed man who'd interrogated Grave. Took this 2 hours ago. They met for 30 minutes. Money changed hands. Ash stared at the photo. You sure it was her? Positive. Could be innocent, client meeting, nothing suspicious. At midnight? In a restaurant that's been closed for renovation for 3 months? Riot's voice was hard. She gave them everything, our contacts, our safe houses, and probably this location. Eli's blood turned to ice. She knows about the cabin? Riot looked at him, and for the first time Eli saw something like pity in the biker's eyes. Grave told her everything during that meeting, figured she needed full information to build your case. How long before they get here? Ash asked. Could be any minute, could be dawn, but they're coming. Knuckles swore viciously. Reaper moved back to the window, scanning the darkness. Ash stood perfectly still, his mind clearly racing through options that kept coming up empty. They'd been betrayed, by someone they trusted, and now the one place they'd thought was safe had become a trap. Eli felt the world tilting sideways. Everything they'd fought for, everything Grave had sacrificed himself for, was unraveling. And it was his fault, his and Nova's. If they hadn't knocked on that clubhouse door, if they'd just kept running, if they'd... Kid, Ash's voice cut through his spiral. Look at me. Eli raised his eyes. This ain't your fault. You hear me? None of this. But none of this. Ash's voice carried absolute authority. Patricia Vance made her choice. Wayne Mercer made his. We made ours. You just survived. That's all you did. Survive. Tears burned behind Eli's eyes. Riot moved to the center of the room. We need to move. Now. I got a truck parked down the road. We load up, head west. Don't stop until we hit the state line. And then what? Knuckles demanded. We're fugitives. Kids in tow. Every cop in 3 states looking for us. How far you think we'll get? Farther than if we stay here and wait for Wayne's friends to roll up with an arrest warrant. Or worse, Reaper muttered. Eli looked between the men. What's worse than an arrest warrant? Nobody answered. What's worse? Eli demanded, his voice rising. Ash met his eyes. Disappearing. You and Nova. Permanently. The words hung in the air like smoke. Eli's mind struggled to process what that meant, but somewhere deep in his gut, he understood. Wayne didn't just want them back. He wanted them gone. Silenced. Erased. And he had the money and connections to make it happen. Why? Eli whispered. Why does he want us dead so badly? That, Ash said quietly, is the question we should have been asking from the beginning. In the Blackwater Ridge police station, Graves sat alone in his cell, a small concrete box with a metal bench and a toilet that smelled like industrial cleaner. They'd moved him here after the interrogation, separated from general population, isolated. Someone wanted him alone. Wanted him thinking, wanted him to crack. It wasn't working. Grave had spent 16 months in a Taliban prison camp, learned firsthand what real isolation felt like. This was summer camp by comparison. But as hours stretched toward dawn, his mind kept circling back to the same question. Why did Wayne Mercer have federal lawyers and shadowy nonprofit organizations backing him? Abusive stepfathers didn't get that kind of support, not unless they offered something in return. Grave thought about the way Mitchell had protected Wayne, the way the court had granted emergency custody despite obvious warning signs, the way Patricia Vance, assuming Riot's intelligence was accurate, had been turned so easily. This wasn't about 2 kids. This was about leverage, control. Something Wayne had that powerful people wanted to keep secret. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside his cell. Grave looked up to see Mitchell approaching with another man, younger, federal agent written all over him in his cheap suit and cold eyes. Mitchell unlocked the cell. On your feet, Maddox. You got a visitor. They led him to a different interrogation room, windowless, soundproofed, the kind of space where things happened that never made official reports. Sitting at the table was a woman Grave recognized immediately from news coverage. District Attorney Rebecca Stanton, mid-40s, sharp-featured, with the kind of ambition that left bodies behind. She gestured for him to sit. Mr. Maddox, thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Didn't realize I had a choice. You always have choices. Stanton folded her hands on the table. The question is whether you make smart ones. Here we go. I've reviewed your situation, and I'll be frank. You're in serious trouble, but I'm prepared to offer you a deal. Already heard the deal. Sign a statement, betray the kids, walk free. That was Wayne Mercer's offer. This is mine. Stanton leaned forward. Tell me everything you know about Wayne Mercer's business operations, who he works for, what he's moving, where the money goes. Give me enough to build a case, and I'll make your kidnapping charges disappear. Graves stared at her. You think Wayne's dirty? I know he is. I just can't prove it. Yet. Stanton's eyes glinted. But a man with your particular skill set might have noticed things during your brief interaction with him, things that could help. I never met Wayne. But you investigated him. I know you did. Bikers don't shelter random kids without doing homework first. She was right. The club had dug into Wayne's background the moment Eli showed up, found irregularities, connections to people with records, money moving through accounts that didn't match his reported income. But Grave had assumed it was standard criminal activity, drugs maybe, stolen goods. Now Stanton was suggesting something bigger. What's Wayne into? Grave asked carefully. Stanton smiled. Tell me what you know first, then we'll compare notes. I don't know anything. Then you're going to die in prison. Stanton stood. Think about it, Mr. Maddox. Wayne Mercer has powerful friends. Friends who are very motivated to make sure certain information stays buried. You're a loose end, and loose ends don't last long. She left him alone in the interrogation room with that threat hanging in the air like a noose, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, Grave felt real fear. Not for himself, for Eli and Nova. Because if Wayne was connected to something big enough to have federal prosecutors sniffing around, then those kids weren't just running from an abusive stepfather. They were running from something that would kill to keep them silent. Back at the cabin, the bikers loaded supplies into Riot's truck with military efficiency, blankets, food, water, weapons, everything they'd need for a run to the state line and beyond. Eli held Nova wrapped in his arms, watching the organized chaos with numb detachment. His mind had shut down somewhere around the revelation that people wanted him and his sister dead. Actually dead. Not just hurt or scared or controlled, but erased. He couldn't process it, couldn't fit it into any framework his 9-year-old brain could construct, so he just held Nova and waited for someone to tell him what to do next. Ash appeared beside him. Time to go, kid. Where? Don't know yet. Somewhere Wayne can't find you. Is there anywhere he can't find us? Ash's silence was answer enough. They loaded into the truck, Eli and Nova in the back seat with Knuckles, Ash riding shotgun, Riot driving, Reaper following on his Harley as rear guard. The cabin's lights died behind them as they pulled onto the dirt road heading west. Rain had stopped, but fog had rolled in, thick and impenetrable. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. The truck's headlights carved a narrow tunnel through white nothing. Nobody spoke. 2 miles from the cabin, Reaper's Harley rumbled up alongside the truck. He gestured urgently toward the tree line. Ash rolled down his window. What? Movement. Left side. Multiple contacts. Before anyone could respond, headlights blazed through the fog ahead. Not cop cars. Not patrol vehicles. Black SUVs. 3 of them. Blocking the road. Riot slammed the brakes. The truck fishtailed, tires screaming. Knuckles grabbed Eli and Nova, shielding them with his body. Doors opened on the SUVs. Men stepped out. Not cops, not federal agents, but private security and tactical gear. Professional, organized, dangerous. Ash's hand moved toward the pistol in his waistband. Don't, Riot said quietly. We're outgunned. One of the men approached the truck, tapping on the window with the barrel of his rifle. Out of the vehicle, slowly, hands where we can see them. Riot looked at Ash. Ash looked at Knuckles. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Ash opened his door and stepped out, hands raised. The others followed. Eli found himself standing in foggy darkness, surrounded by armed men who'd appeared like ghosts. Nova whimpered against his chest. His legs shook so hard he thought they might give out. One of the security team stepped forward, older, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd commanded soldiers before. He looked at Eli with clinical assessment. Eli Mercer? Eli couldn't speak, couldn't move. I'll take that as confirmation. The man gestured to his team. Secure the children. Restrain the others. No. Ash moved between Eli and the approaching security. You want those kids? You go through us. That can be arranged. Weapons raised. Fingers moved to triggers. And in that crystalline moment of perfect clarity, Eli understood they were going to die here. All of them. In foggy darkness on a forgotten road executed by men who'd vanish before sunrise. But then new headlights blazed through the fog. A convoy. 6 vehicles. Moving fast. The security team pivoted, weapons tracking the new threat. The lead vehicle screeched to a halt and a door opened. A woman stepped out, Patricia Vance. But she wasn't alone. Behind her came federal agents. Real ones, with badges and authority that even private security had to respect. The gray-haired commander's expression went from confident to calculating in a heartbeat. Federal investigation, Patricia announced, her voice carrying across the road. These children are under protective custody pending... On whose authority? The commander interrupted. Patricia held up a document. Judge Martinez. Signed 30 minutes ago. You interfere, you're obstructing justice. A standoff within a standoff. Armed men facing armed men while Eli stood in the middle, clutching Nova, trying to understand how Patricia Vance, who'd supposedly betrayed them, was now saving them. Unless this was another trap. Unless everyone was playing angles he couldn't see. The commander studied Patricia for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon and gestured for his team to stand down. This isn't over, he said quietly. No, Patricia agreed. It's just beginning. The security team melted back into their SUVs and disappeared into the fog. Patricia approached Eli slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. I'm sorry for everything, but you need to come with me now. Why should we trust you? Ash demanded. Because I'm the only person standing between these kids and a mass grave. Patricia's voice was steel. And because if we don't move in the next 2 minutes, more people are going to die tonight. Eli looked at Ash. The old biker's expression was unreadable. Then Ash nodded. Get in the car, kid. But now. Eli climbed into Patricia's vehicle, still holding Nova. Federal agents surrounded them. The convoy pulled away, leaving the bikers standing in fog and darkness. As they drove, Eli looked back through the rear window, watched Ash, Knuckles, Riot, and Reaper fade into white nothing, watched the only people who'd protected him disappear, and realized with bone-deep certainty that he was about to learn why everyone wanted him and Nova dead. The federal safe house sat on the outskirts of Blackwater Ridge, in a neighborhood that had died with the steel mills 20 years ago. Boarded windows, chain-link fences, streetlights that hadn't worked since Eli was born. The perfect place to hide something, or someone, the world wasn't supposed to see. Patricia Vance led Eli and Nova inside while federal agents secured the perimeter. The interior was sterile, government-issue furniture, fluorescent lights that hummed like insects, the smell of industrial carpet and fear. Eli clutched Nova against his chest, his eyes tracking every shadow, every movement, every potential threat. They'd taken him from the bikers, from Ash, from the only people who'd actually protected him, and now he was trapped in a room with the woman who'd supposedly sold them out. Patricia closed the door and locked it. The click echoed like a gunshot. Sit down, Eli. No. Please, we don't have much time. Time for what? Eli's voice cracked. Time for you to hand us over to Wayne, to whoever those men in the fog were? Patricia's expression didn't change. She moved to the window and peered through the blinds at the street below. Those men work for Families First Foundation, which is a front for a private military contractor called Sentinel Group, which is owned by a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands, which is funded by people who make Wayne Mercer look like a saint. Eli stared at her. I don't understand. Your mother did. That's why they killed her. The world stopped. Eli's legs gave out. He sank into a chair, Nova still clutched in his arms, his mind refusing to process what Patricia had just said. My mom died in a car accident. Your mom was murdered. Patricia turned to face him. Brake lines cut. Steering column tampered with. Made to look like mechanical failure. But I've seen the forensics report the police buried. You're lying. I wish I was. Patricia pulled out a thick manila folder from her briefcase and dropped it on the table between them. Your mother was an accountant. Worked for a firm that handled finances for several nonprofits, including Families First Foundation. 3 years ago, she noticed irregularities. Money moving in ways that didn't match the public tax filings. Donations from shell corporations. Payments to offshore accounts. Eli couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She started digging, quietly, on her own time. And she discovered that Families First Foundation wasn't helping families at all. It was a money laundering operation. Funneling cash from drug trafficking, human trafficking, arms deals, all of it cleaned through a nonprofit that claimed to protect children. The irony was so sick, Eli wanted to vomit. She made copies of everything, Patricia continued. Spreadsheets, bank statements, communications between the foundation's board and their criminal partners. Enough evidence to bring down the entire operation. And then she hid it. Where? I don't know. Nobody knows. That's the problem. Patricia sat down across from Eli. Before she could go to the authorities, your mother realized she was being watched, followed. She knew if she went public, they'd kill her, so she did something incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. What? She told Wayne Mercer everything, showed him proof, asked him to hide the evidence in case anything happened to her. Eli's blood ran cold. Wayne was in on it? No, at least not then. He was just her husband, a construction worker with a temper and a drinking problem, but no criminal connections. She thought she could trust him. Patricia's voice hardened. She was wrong. What did he do? He panicked, went to the foundation looking for money, tried to blackmail them, said he'd go public with what his wife had discovered unless they paid him off. They killed her instead. Yes, made it look like an accident. And then they made Wayne an offer he couldn't refuse, keep his mouth shut, help them find the evidence your mother hid, and they'd make him rich. Refuse, and his stepchildren would have accidents too. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Wayne's sudden wealth after Mom died. The way he'd fought for custody of kids he'd never wanted. The violence that escalated every time Eli mentioned looking through Mom's old belongings. Wayne wasn't just abusive, he was terrified, because he'd sold his soul to monsters and hadn't delivered what they'd paid for. What evidence? Eli whispered. What did Mom hide? We think it's a hard drive, USB stick, maybe. Something small enough to conceal but detailed enough to destroy the entire operation. Patricia leaned forward. And we think she hid it somewhere Wayne could access but wouldn't think to look. Somewhere connected to you or Nova. Eli's mind raced through memories. Mom's last days before the accident. The way she'd spent extra time with him, reading bedtime stories, talking about being brave, about protecting his sister. The old jewelry box she'd given him that he'd thought was just a keepsake. I don't know where it is, Eli said. Then we have a problem. Because Sentinel Group thinks you do. And they're not going to stop until they've turned over every inch of your life looking for it. The bikers are marked men now, every single one of them. Patricia's voice was flat. Sentinel doesn't leave loose ends. Ash, Knuckles, Riot, Reaper, they're all targets. And Graves sitting in a cell is the only thing keeping him alive right now. Tears burned behind Eli's eyes. This is my fault. No, this is your mother's legacy. She tried to do the right thing and it got her killed. Now you have to decide if you're going to finish what she started. I'm 9 years old. I know. Patricia's expression softened almost imperceptibly, which is why I need you to trust me. One more time, even though I gave you every reason not to. You met with Wayne's lawyer. Riot saw you. I met with him because he approached me with a bribe. $500,000 to sell you out. Tell Sentinel where the cabin was. Make sure you were delivered quietly. Patricia pulled out her phone and showed Eli photos. The same restaurant Riot had photographed, but from different angles showing recording equipment, federal agents watching from nearby tables. I wore a wire. Got everything on tape, his threats, his offer, proof of obstruction of justice. Eli stared at the photos. You were working with the FBI the whole time? Not the whole time, just since yesterday morning when the district attorney approached me. She's been investigating Family's First Foundation for 2 years. Your case gave her the opening she needed. So the bikers didn't know, couldn't know. If Sentinels suspected I'd flipped, they'd have killed all of you before I could get protection in place. Eli's hand shook. Everything he'd believed about the last 24 hours was wrong. Patricia hadn't betrayed them. She'd been playing the most dangerous game possible, pretending to be compromised while building a case from the inside. What happens now? Eli asked. Now we use you as bait. Check. Blackwater Ridge Police Station. 3 a.m. Graves sat on the edge of his cell's metal bench with his head in his gloved hands, exhaustion pressing down like a physical weight. He hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Eli's terrified face, heard Nova crying, felt the crushing certainty that he'd failed them. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Grave looked up to see District Attorney Rebecca Stanton approaching with 2 federal marshals flanking her. On your feet, Mr. Maddox. He stood slowly. Here to make another deal? Here to tell you your brothers just walked into a trap. Stanton unlocked the cell herself. And you're the only person who can get them out alive. Graves' blood turned to ice. What trap? Riot received a call 30 minutes ago. Anonymous tip claiming Eli and Nova were being held at an abandoned warehouse on the east side. Said federal agents were dirty, working with Sentinel Group, planning to disappear the kids tonight. That's bullshit. I know, you know, but Riot doesn't. Neither does Ash or the others. Stanton stepped aside as the marshals removed Graves' cuffs. They're riding into an ambush right now. Sentinel's going to kill them, stage it as a shootout with police, and use their deaths to justify taking custody of the children. Graves' hands curled into fists. How long ago did they leave? 20 minutes, maybe less. Then we're already too late. Maybe. Maybe not. Stanton handed him a phone. Patricia Vance is with Eli now. She's going to call Wayne Mercer, tell him we have the evidence his wife hid. Tell him we're willing to trade, the evidence for the children. Wayne won't buy it. Wayne's desperate. Sentinel's breathing down his neck. He hasn't delivered what he promised them, and his usefulness is running out. Stanton's eyes were hard. He'll take the meeting, and when he does, we spring the trap. Using Eli as bait. Using everyone as bait. Your brothers, the kids, you, me. Everyone who can draw Sentinel into the open where we can take them down. Grave wanted to punch her, wanted to wrap his hands around her throat and squeeze until the entitled certainty drained from her eyes. Because she was talking about human lives like they were chess pieces. Expendable, acceptable losses in pursuit of a bigger win. But he'd been in enough battles to know sometimes that was the only play left. What do you need from me? He asked. Ride to that warehouse, stop your brothers before they get killed, and buy us enough time to make Wayne come out of hiding. Stanton gestured toward the door. Your bike's outside, full tank, GPS unit with the warehouse coordinates. Grave moved toward the hallway, then stopped. If this goes sideways, if those kids die, I'm coming for you, federal prosecutor or not. Stanton met his eyes without flinching. If those kids die, I'll hand you the knife myself. The warehouse sat in Blackwater Ridge's industrial district like a tombstone. 3 stories of crumbling brick and shattered windows, surrounded by rusted chain-link fence and dead weeds. No lights, no movement, just darkness and the smell of decay. Ash's pickup truck sat parked 2 blocks away in the shadow of a condemned factory. Inside, 4 bikers prepared for war with the grim efficiency of men who'd done this before. Ash checked his pistol's magazine. Reaper, you take the north entrance. Knuckles, south. Riot and I go through the loading dock. What if it's a setup? Knuckles asked. Then we die. Ash's voice was flat. But we die trying to save those kids. That's the job. Riot chambered around. Grave would tell us we're being idiots. Grave ain't here. Yeah, and that should tell us something. Ash looked at him. You got something to say? I'm saying this smells wrong. Anonymous tip? Convenient location? Federal agents supposedly going dirty? Riot shook his head. Sentinels playing us. So what do you want to do? Walk away? I want to think for 5 goddamn seconds before we charge into a building that's probably rigged to blow. The 2 men stared at each other across the truck's cab. Old tensions, old disagreements, the same argument they'd been having for years about when to fight and when to run. Knuckles broke the silence. We need to call Grave. Grave's in lockup. Then we call Patricia. Get confirmation Eli and Nova are actually in there. Before anyone could respond, headlights blazed behind them. A single motorcycle roaring up the street, engine screaming, rider low over the handlebars. Grave. He skidded to a stop beside the truck and killed the engine. Swung off the bike with his cut flaring behind him like wings. "Stand down!" he barked. "It's a trap!" Ash was out of the truck instantly.
What are you doing out of jail? Stanton cut me loose. Warehouse is empty. Sentinel's using it to draw you in. How do you know? Because I'm not an idiot. Graves' eyes were wild, desperate, and neither should you be. Think, Ash, why would federal agents hold kids in an abandoned building? Why tip off a biker gang? It's bait. All of it. Riot climbed out of the truck. So where are Eli and Nova? Safe house, federal protection. Patricia's with them. Patricia sold us out. Patricia's FBI has been since yesterday. Whole thing was a sting operation. The bikers exchanged glances, processing, recalculating. Knuckles spoke first. So what's the play? Grave pulled out the phone Stanton had given him. We use ourselves as bait. Draw Wayne into the open. Make him think we're desperate enough to trade something we don't have for kids who aren't actually in danger. That's insane. That's the only option. Grave looked at each of his brothers. Sentinel wants a war. Let's give them one. On our terms. Our ground. Ash was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Where and when? The clubhouse. 1 hour. Stanton's coordinating with FBI to have support nearby but out of sight. Wayne brings his Sentinel bodyguards thinking he's walking into a negotiation. We serve him up to federal agents with enough evidence to bury the entire operation. And if Wayne doesn't show, Riot asked, then we improvise. Thunder rumbled overhead. Rain began to fall, light at first, then harder, drumming on metal and asphalt like artillery. Reaper appeared from the shadows where he'd been providing overwatch. We got movement. East side of the warehouse, 3 vehicles, tactical teams deploying. Everyone turned to look. Through the rain and darkness, figures moved with military precision, surrounding the building, setting up crossfire lanes, waiting for bikers who were never going to arrive. Grave allowed himself a cold smile. Let's get out of here before they realize we're ghosts. They mounted their bikes in silence. 4 Harleys and Graves' borrowed machine. Engines roared to life like thunder, drowning the rain, announcing their presence to anyone listening. Then they were gone, racing through Blackwater Ridge's empty streets, while behind them Sentinel Group wasted resources on an empty building. But as they rode, Graves' mind churned with ugly mathematics. They dodged 1 trap, bought themselves an hour, maybe less. But Sentinel had resources, manpower, money, political connections, and the Iron Vultures had nothing but guts and a death wish. The math didn't favor their survival. The safe house phone rang at 3:30 in the morning. Patricia answered on the first ring. Vance? Wayne Mercer's voice crackled through the speaker. I heard you have something that belongs to me. Patricia met Eli's eyes across the room. The kid sat perfectly still, Nova asleep in his lap, listening to every word even though he couldn't hear Wayne's side of the conversation. I have evidence, Patricia said carefully. Evidence your wife compiled before her death. Evidence that implicates Families First Foundation in multiple federal crimes. Silence on the other end. Then Wayne laughed, bitter, exhausted. You think I care about evidence? You think I care about any of this? I think you're terrified. I think Sentinel's lost patience with you, and I think you know what happens to people who fail to deliver. More silence. Patricia could hear Wayne breathing, heavy, ragged. What do you want? He finally asked. A trade? Evidence for the children. Clean handoff. Nobody gets hurt. Sentinel won't let me walk away. Sentinel doesn't have to know. You bring the kids to me, I give you the evidence, you deliver it to your handlers and disappear. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. Wayne's voice dropped to barely a whisper. You have no idea what these people are capable of. Then help me bring them down. Testify. Turn state's evidence. We can protect you.
Wayne laughed again, the sound of a man who'd stopped believing in protection years ago. Nobody can protect anyone from Sentinel. Not you, not the FBI, not God himself. Then you're a dead man anyway. Might as well go down fighting. The line went quiet for so long Patricia thought he'd hung up. Then Wayne spoke again, his voice hollow. Iron Vulture's clubhouse. 1 hour. I bring my security. You bring the evidence. We make the trade. And then you forget you ever knew my name. The line went dead. Patricia set down the phone and looked at Eli. He took the bait. What happens now? Now we move you and Nova to secondary location, somewhere Sentinel can't reach even if everything goes wrong. And the bikers? Patricia's expression was grim. They become the storm everyone has to weather. The Iron Vulture's clubhouse had never looked more like a fortress. Every window barred, every door reinforced. Harleys parked in defensive positions around the perimeter. Inside, 12 bikers prepared for the last stand with the kind of quiet intensity that preceded violence. Graves stood at the center of the main room, checking weapons with methodical precision. The federal agents were staged 3 blocks away, close enough to respond, far enough not to spook Wayne's security. The wire taped to Graves' chest itched, but he didn't scratch, didn't move. Just focused on the weight of the pistol in his hands and the mathematics of survival. Ash approached from the back room. Perimeter secure, Reapers on the roof with a rifle. Knuckles is covering the rear entrance. Good. Grave. Ash's voice dropped. This is suicide. Probably. We could run, take the kids, disappear into the wind. And live the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders? Grave met his eyes. That ain't living, brother. That's just slow dying. Better than fast dying. Maybe. Grave chambered around. But I'm tired of running. Tired of letting monsters win because fighting back is hard. Your choice is your own. But I'm done. Ash was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded and moved back to his position. Riot appeared from the garage, his expression unreadable. You know this is insane, right? You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. Riot crossed his arms. We're outlaws. We're supposed to be smarter than this, supposed to know when to fold. You're right. Grave looked at him. So why are you still here? Riot opened his mouth, closed it. His jaw worked like he was chewing words too bitter to swallow. Because I'm an idiot, he finally said. Because somewhere along the way, I started believing we could actually win. That maybe this time the good guys don't have to die for doing the right thing. We're not the good guys, Riot. No, but we're the only guys who showed up. Headlights appeared at the end of the street. 3 black SUVs rolling slow and menacing through rain that had become a downpour. They stopped 50 feet from the clubhouse, engines idling, headlights cutting through darkness like searchlights. Doors opened. Wayne Mercer stepped out of the lead vehicle, flanked by 8 Sentinel operators in tactical gear. He looked like a man walking to his execution, pale, sweating, his hand shaking despite the tough guy posture he was trying to project. Graves stepped out onto the clubhouse porch. Rain hammered his leather cut. Wind cut through him like knives. Wayne, good of you to come. Where's the evidence? Wayne's voice barely carried over the storm. Inside, where are the kids? Safe. With people who know how to handle them. That's not the deal. Deal's changed. Wayne gestured to his security team. You hand over what my wife stole, I make sure Sentinel doesn't burn this clubhouse to the ground with everyone inside. Simple transaction. Graves studied the operators surrounding Wayne. Professional, disciplined. Eyes scanning for threats with the efficiency of people who killed for a living. This wasn't going to be a negotiation. This was going to be an execution. Evidence is inside, Graves said. You want it, you come get it. Wayne laughed nervously. You think I'm stupid? I walk in there. Your boys put a bullet in my head. Your boys put a bullet in mine. FBI puts bullets in all of you. We're wired. Agents are watching. This goes sideways. Everyone dies. The bluff hung in the air between them. Wayne looked at his security commander, the same gray-haired man from the fog. The commander's expression never changed, but something passed between them. A calculation. A decision. Show me the evidence, the commander said. I verify it's authentic. We walk away clean. No. Wayne comes inside. Alone. You and your team stay here. Not happening. Then we're at an impasse, like. The commander's hand moved toward his weapon. Behind Grave, the clubhouse door opened. Every iron vulture who could stand filed out onto the porch. 12 men, 12 weapons, 12 middle fingers to the idea of backing down. The rain hammered harder. Lightning split the sky. For 3 heartbeats, the world balanced on the edge of a knife. Then sirens wailed in the distance. The commander's eyes narrowed. You set us up. You set yourselves up. Graves' voice was ice. Every word you've said tonight is on tape. Every threat documented. You came here to murder federal witnesses. That's a life sentence. Not if there's no witnesses. The commander raised his weapon. Everything happened at once. The iron vultures raised their guns. Sentinel operators mirrored them. Wayne Mercer dove behind his SUV, screaming. FBI vehicles roared up the street from 3 directions. Sirens screaming, lights blazing. The commander fired. Grave dropped and rolled as the bullet punched through air where his head had been a second before. Return fire erupted from the clubhouse. Controlled bursts, disciplined, aimed to suppress rather than kill. Sentinel operators scattered, seeking cover behind vehicles. Muzzle flashes lit the rain like strobe lights. Glass shattered. Metal sparked. Bullets tore through wood and leather and flesh. Knuckles went down with a scream, clutching his shoulder. Reaper's rifle barked from the roof. Dropping 1 Sentinel operator before return fire forced him to cover. Ash and Riot moved like ghosts through chaos, laying down suppressing fire, while Grave low-crawled toward Wayne's SUV. FBI agents poured from their vehicles, weapons drawn, shouting commands nobody could hear over gunfire and thunder. The world had become violence, pure and simple. No negotiation, no mercy. Just men trying to kill men while rain washed blood into gutters. Grave reached Wayne's SUV and dragged the terrified stepfather out from behind it. "Where are the kids?" Grave shouted over the chaos. "I don't know. I swear I don't know." "You're lying." "I'm not." Wayne's face was a mask of terror. "Sentinel took them. After the fog. They said they needed insurance. I haven't seen them since." Grave's blood turned to ice. If Sentinel had Eli and Nova, then everything, the negotiation, the trap, the carefully orchestrated operation, was meaningless. Patricia had been wrong, or lied, or been played herself, and 2 kids were in the hands of people who specialized in making problems disappear. Grave looked up at the battle raging around him. FBI agents exchanging fire with Sentinel operators, his brothers bleeding on clubhouse steps, Wayne Mercer sobbing in the rain, and somewhere in Blackwater Ridge, Eli and Nova were running out of time. Grave made a choice. He stood, grabbed Wayne by the collar, and dragged him toward the nearest FBI vehicle, threw him at the feet of Rebecca Stanton, who'd taken cover behind an armored car. "He's your witness," Grave shouted. "Get what you need from him." Stanton stared at him. "Where are you going?" "To finish this." Grave ran for his Harley, bullets chewing up asphalt around his boots, swung onto the bike, kicked the engine to life. Behind him, Ash appeared, blood streaming from a gash on his temple. "Grave, wait!" But Grave was already gone, tearing through rain and chaos and federal agents, heading toward the one place he should have looked from the beginning. The place where nightmares are born. Wayne Mercer's house. Wayne Mercer's house sat at the end of a dead-end street like a tombstone. 2-story colonial with peeling paint, overgrown lawn, and windows that glowed with the sickly yellow light of people who'd stopped pretending everything was fine. Grave killed his Harley's engine 2 blocks away and approached on foot through rain that had softened to a cold drizzle. 3 black SUVs sat in the driveway. Sentinel was here. And if Sentinel was here, so were Eli and Nova. Grave moved through shadows with the practiced silence of someone who'd hunted men in worse conditions. His hands, still gloved, always gloved, ached from gripping the pistol too tight. Every muscle in his body screamed exhaustion. Blood from a grazing wound on his ribs had soaked through his shirt and dried sticky beneath his leather cut. He should have waited for backup, should have coordinated with FBI, should have done 100 things that weren't charging alone into a house full of trained killers. But Grave had stopped caring about should have the moment Wayne said Sentinel had the kids. He reached the side fence and vaulted it without a sound, moved through the backyard past a rusted swing set and dead garden. The back door stood slightly ajar, deliberate, probably. A trap within a trap. Grave didn't care. He slipped inside. The kitchen smelled like rotted food and desperation. Dishes piled in the sink, trash overflowing. The lived-in decay of a man who'd given up on everything except survival. Grave moved through it like smoke, pistol raised, eyes scanning corners and doorways. Voices drifted from upstairs. Low, professional. The clipped cadence of people coordinating an operation. Grave took the stairs one at a time, testing each step for creaks. At the top, a hallway stretched toward 3 closed doors. Light leaked from beneath the one on the right. The voices came from there. He pressed his back against the wall and listened. Confirmation from command. Package is ready for transport. We move in 10 minutes. What about the mess downtown? Mitchell's handling it. FBI thinks they won a war. Let them. By the time they realize what they actually got, we'll be across state lines with the assets. Assets. They were calling Eli and Nova assets. Graves' vision went red at the edges. His finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct screamed to kick the door down and start shooting. But he'd learned in Afghanistan that rage got soldiers killed, so he forced himself to breathe, to count, to think. 3 voices inside, maybe 4. Unknown number of operators elsewhere in the house. Even if he got the drop on the room, backup would flood in before he could extract the kids. He needed a different play. Grave pulled out his phone and typed a message to Ash. Wayne's house. Sentinel has kids. Need distraction. 2 minutes. The response came instantly. On the way. Grave pocketed the phone and moved to the door. Tested the handle. Unlocked. Through this crack, he could see part of the room. A bedroom converted to a command center with laptops, radios, tactical gear spread across surfaces. And in the corner, barely visible, a small figure huddled on the floor. Eli. The kid's hands were zip-tied behind his back. Bruises darkened his face. Blood crusted his split lip. But his eyes were open. Alert. Watching the Sentinel operators with the kind of feral calculation that spoke of someone planning escape or revenge. Graves' heart clenched. No sign of Nova. One of the operators glanced at his watch. Package the asset. Let's move. 2 men approached Eli. The kid didn't fight, just went limp and passive, making himself dead weight. They dragged him upright anyway, hauling him toward the door. Toward Grave. Grave stepped back into shadow and waited. The door opened. The first operator emerged, weapon slung, focused on the stairs ahead. The second followed, half-carrying Eli. Grave moved. He grabbed the first operator's head and slammed it into the door frame with a crack like a gunshot. The man dropped. Before the second could react, Grave had his pistol pressed against the man's temple. Put him down. The operator froze. Eli's eyes went wide. I said put him down. The operator released Eli carefully. The kid stumbled but caught himself against the wall. On your knees, Grave ordered. Hands behind your head. The operator complied with the resigned efficiency of someone who'd been on both sides of this equation. Grave zip-tied his wrists with the man's own restraints, then stuffed a gag in his mouth. Eli stared at him in shock. Grave? Where's Nova? Downstairs, bedroom on the left. 2 guards. Before Grave could respond, shouts erupted from inside the command room. Boots pounded. The remaining operators had realized something was wrong. Grave grabbed Eli and pulled him toward the stairs. Run! Get outside! FBI's 3 blocks north. Go!
What about you? I'll get Nova. Go. Eli hesitated for a heartbeat, torn between survival instinct and loyalty to the sister he'd protected his whole life. Then he ran, his bound hands making him awkward but not slow. Grave turned to face the door as it burst open. 2 Sentinel operators emerged, weapons raised. Grave fired twice, controlled bursts, center mass, the muscle memory of 1,000 training drills. Both men dropped, but gunfire echoed through the house like thunder, and now everyone knew exactly where he was. Grave descended the stairs in a controlled fall, using momentum and gravity to reach the first floor before Sentinel could organize. He hit the landing and rolled, coming up with his pistol tracking toward the bedroom Eli had indicated. The door was closed, locked. Grave kicked it open. Inside, Nova sat in a portable crib, whimpering but alive. 1 Sentinel operator stood guard near the window. He spun at the intrusion, weapon rising.
Graves shot him in the shoulder, non-lethal but incapacitating. The man screamed and went down, clutching the wound. Grave crossed the room and scooped Nova from the crib. She was lighter than he expected, fragile. Her tiny hands clutched his leather cut with desperate strength. "I got you," he whispered. "You're safe now." Footsteps thundered overhead. Voices shouted coordinates. Sentinel was converging. Grave moved toward the window and looked out. 10-foot drop to muddy ground. Not ideal with a baby, but better than the alternatives. He wrapped Nova inside his cut, holding her tight against his chest. Pushed the window open. Rain and cold air rushed in. Behind him, the bedroom door exploded inward. The gray-haired Sentinel commander stood silhouetted in the doorway, pistol aimed at Graves' head. "Put the child down." "No. I will shoot you." "Then you shoot me." Grave turned to face him fully, Nova protected behind the bulk of his body. "But you'll have to go through both of us." The commander's expression never changed. "You think you're a hero? You're just a criminal playing dress-up. That child belongs with her legal guardian." "Her legal guardian tried to sell her to you." "Wayne Mercer made mistakes. We're correcting them." "By kidnapping kids? By murdering their mother?" Graves' voice was ice. "You're not correcting anything. You're covering up crime so your bosses can keep stealing. We provide security for people who pay for results. What they do with those results isn't our concern." It is now. Outside, the wail of sirens grew closer. The distraction Ash had promised, emergency calls, false reports, anything to flood the area with police presence. The commander heard it too. His eyes narrowed. "Last chance. Put down the child and walk away. You have my word you won't be harmed." "Your word means nothing." "Then you die." The commander's finger tightened on the trigger. Glass exploded inward as Ash crashed through the window behind Grave. The old biker hit the ground rolling, came up firing. His bullets punched into the commander's vest, not penetrating, but the impact knocked him backward. Grave didn't wait. He dove through the broken window with Nova clutched against his chest, hit the muddy ground hard, rolled to absorb impact. Pain lanced through his ribs, but he was up and running before his brain registered the damage. Ash followed a heartbeat later, providing covering fire as Sentinel operators appeared at the window. They sprinted through Wayne's overgrown backyard toward the fence. Reaper's Harley roared to life in the alley beyond, engines screaming. Knuckles, shoulder bandaged but functional, sat behind him with a shotgun across his lap. "Go, go!" Ash shouted. Grave vaulted the fence one-handed, Nova still protected inside his cut. Landed badly, his ankle twisting. Didn't matter. He limped toward the Harley while Ash and Knuckles laid down suppressing fire. Behind them, Sentinel operators poured from Wayne's house. Muzzle flashes lit the rain. Bullets chewed up fence posts and street signs. Grave swung onto Reaper's bike. Nova clutched tight. Ash jumped on behind him. The Harley lurched forward, tires screaming, engine roaring defiance at the night. They tore through Blackwater Ridge's back streets with Sentinel vehicles in pursuit. But the Iron Vultures knew these roads, every alley, every shortcut, every dead end that wasn't. Within 3 blocks, they'd lost their pursuers in a maze of industrial parks and abandoned warehouses. Reaper didn't slow until they reached the emergency rendezvous point, a truck stop on the outskirts of town where Riot waited with Eli huddled in the cab of a stolen pickup. Grave dismounted carefully, his body screaming protest. He unwrapped Nova from his cut and checked her over with shaking hands. Bruises, dehydration, exhaustion, but alive. Breathing. Safe. Eli stumbled from the truck and grabbed his sister, tears streaming down his face. "Nova! Oh God, Nova!" The baby whimpered and clutched her brother with tiny fists. Grave watched them in silence, something breaking and reforming in his chest. He'd seen a lot of violence in his life, a lot of death, but he'd never seen anything as purely good as a 9-year-old boy holding his baby sister like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Ash appeared at his shoulder. "Stanton's got Wayne in custody. Sentinels scattered. FBI's raiding Families First Foundation offices across 3 states. The kids? Witness protection, new identities, fresh start somewhere Wayne and his friends can't reach." Grave nodded slowly. It was the right play. The only play. But it still felt like losing. Eli looked up from Nova. "What happens to us?" You disappear, Graves said quietly. New names, new city, new life. The government makes sure nobody ever finds you. What about you? We go back to being outlaws. Eli's face crumpled. I don't want to disappear. I want to stay with you. The words hit Grave like a bullet. He crouched down to Eli's level, his gloved hands gentle on the kid's shoulders. I know, but this is bigger than what you want or what I want. Sentinel's not going to stop. Even with Wayne in custody, even with their operation exposed, they've got resources we can't match. The only way you and Nova survive is if you become ghosts. But listen to me. Graves' voice was firm but not harsh. Your mom died protecting you. She hid evidence that could have saved her life because she knew it was the only way to keep you safe long term. Don't let that sacrifice be for nothing. Tears streamed down Eli's face. I'm scared. I know. Being scared means you're smart. Grave pulled the kid into a rough hug. But you're also brave. Braver than any soldier I served with. Braver than most men I've known. You'll be okay. Will I ever see you again? Grave wanted to lie. Wanted to promise something he couldn't deliver. But he'd never lied to this kid, and he wasn't starting now. Probably not. Eli sobbed against his chest while Nova whimpered in confusion, and the Iron Vultures stood in silent witness to a goodbye that nobody wanted but everyone understood was necessary. When Eli finally pulled back, his eyes were red but his jaw was set. If I can't see you again, can I at least know why you helped us? Grave was quiet for a long moment. Then he slowly pulled off his right glove. His hand was a mess of scar tissue. Burns that had healed badly, skin grafted in patches, fingers that didn't quite bend right anymore. The kind of injury that told a story of fire and pain and choices made in impossible moments. Kandahar Province, 2009. My convoy hit an IED. Vehicle flipped, started burning. Graves' voice was distant. Driver was trapped. 19 years old, kid from Oklahoma who joined up to pay for college. Door was jammed, fire spreading. I had maybe 30 seconds before the fuel tank went. Eli stared at the scarred hand. I got him out. Burned my hands to hell doing it. But I got him out. Grave flexed his fingers slowly. Cost me my career, medically discharged. Came home to nothing. No job. No purpose. Just these hands that don't work right, and nightmares that never stop. What happened to the driver? Died 3 weeks later, infection from his own burns. Graves' voice was flat. I destroyed myself saving someone who died anyway. For years I thought that meant I'd failed, that the sacrifice was pointless. What changed? Grave looked at Eli, bruised, exhausted, holding his sister with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd learned too young that the world was cruel and family was everything. You did. When you knocked on our door asking for help, I saw that driver's face, saw every person I couldn't save. And I realized sacrifice isn't about outcomes. It's about showing up, about being the person who doesn't walk away even when walking away is easier. Grave pulled his glove back on carefully. So I helped you because someone needed help and I was there. Simple as that. Eli's voice was barely a whisper. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just survive. Live long enough to make your mom's sacrifice mean something. That's all the thanks I need. Headlights appeared in the distance, federal vehicles, moving with purpose. Rebecca Stanton stepped out of the lead car, flanked by U.S. Marshals. Time to go, she said quietly. The Marshals approached Eli and Nova with practiced gentleness. One of them, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, crouched down to Eli's level. Hey there, I'm Marshal Chen. We're going to take care of you and your sister now. Get you somewhere safe and warm. That okay? Eli looked at Grave one last time. Grave nodded. Go on, kid. You got this. Eli let Marshal Chen take Nova from his arms. Let her guide him toward the federal vehicle. But at the last moment, he turned back. Grave? Yeah? My mom used to say the safest people in the world are the ones who look the most dangerous. I didn't believe her until I met you. Then he was gone. Disappeared into the federal vehicle that pulled away into rain and darkness. Grave stood in the parking lot long after the taillights faded, his chest tight with an emotion he didn't have words for. Ash put a hand on his shoulder. You did good, brother. Did I? Kid's alive. Sister's alive. Wayne's in custody. Sentinels scattered. Yeah, you did good. Grave wanted to believe him. Wanted to feel like the last 48 hours had meant something beyond exhaustion and bullet wounds, and saying goodbye to people he'd never see again. But all he felt was empty. Stanton approached from the shadows. We need your statements. All of you. Federal investigation's going to need detailed accounts of everything that happened. Later, Grave said. Mr. Maddox. I said later. Grave turned to face her. Those kids are gone. Wayne's in your custody. You got your case. We're done. Stanton studied him for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. Fair enough. Come by the federal building tomorrow. We'll take statements then. She left without another word. The Iron Vultures stood alone in the truck stop parking lot as dawn began to break over Blackwater Ridge. The rain had finally stopped. The sky was clearing, and somewhere in the distance, the city was waking up to a day that looked exactly like yesterday, despite everything that had changed. Riot lit a cigarette and exhaled smoke into the cold air. What now? Now we go home, Grave said. Fix what's broken. Bury our dead, keep riding. That's it? That's all there ever is. They mounted their Harleys in silence. 5 engines roared to life, thunder in the pre-dawn quiet. A declaration that they were still here, still fighting, still refusing to disappear no matter how hard the world tried to erase them. As they rode back toward the clubhouse through empty streets, Grave felt the weight of his gloved hands on the handlebars, felt the scars beneath the leather, felt every choice he'd made that led to this moment, and for the first time in years, he didn't regret a single one. 3 months later. The Iron Vultures clubhouse had been rebuilt. New windows, reinforced doors, the scars of the shootout patched but not erased. Some wounds were meant to be remembered. Grave sat at the same scarred oak table where Eli had eaten scrambled eggs that first night, nursing a beer he wasn't really drinking. The clubhouse was quieter these days. Knuckles still favored his injured shoulder. Reaper had taken a bullet in the leg that left him with a permanent limp, and 2 chairs sat empty where brothers had fallen in the final firefight. But they'd survived, and survival counted for something. Ash dropped into the seat across from him. Got something for you. He slid an envelope across the table. No return address. Postmarked from somewhere in Oregon. Grave opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper, a child's drawing in crayon. 2 stick figures holding hands. One tall with a leather jacket, one small, both smiling. At the bottom, in careful block letters, "Thank you for being my hero." Grave stared at the drawing for a long time. His throat felt tight. His eyes burned. "Kid's doing okay," Ash said quietly. "Marshall Chen sends updates through Patricia. New names, new school, foster family that actually gives a damn. Nova's thriving. Eli's seeing a therapist. They're making it work." "Good. You ever gonna write back?" "Can't. Compromises their cover." "Yeah." Ash was quiet for a moment. "Still feels wrong, though. Helping someone and then just disappearing from their life." Grave carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into his cut, right over his heart. "That's the job. We show up when nobody else will. We do what needs doing. Then we disappear so they can have the life we made possible. Simple as that." "Don't feel simple." "No, it doesn't." The clubhouse door opened and Riot walked in with a cardboard box. "Package came for you, Grave. No return address." Grave accepted the box with caution, opened it carefully. Inside was a leather vest, child-sized, black, with careful stitching across the back. "Iron Vultures, little brother." And beneath it, a note in handwriting that wasn't Eli's. Adult, feminine, Patricia's. "He asked me to make sure this reached you. Said you promised him one, but never got the chance to deliver. Figured better late than never. The kids are safe. Happy. And they think about you every day. Thank you for giving them a future." P.V. Grave lifted the small vest from the box, ran his gloved fingers over the stitching, imagined Eli wearing it, imagined a world where that could have been possible. Then he set it carefully on the empty chair beside him, a memorial to the brother he'd saved but couldn't keep. Knuckles appeared from the back room. We got a situation. Kid showed up at the door. Every head in the clubhouse snapped toward him. What kid? Grave asked. 14, maybe 15. Beat to hell. Says his stepdad's trying to kill him and his little sister. Says he heard we help people. The room went silent. Grave looked at the small vest on the chair beside him, looked at his brothers gathered around the table, looked at the scars they all carried, physical and otherwise, from the last time they'd answered a knock in the rain. Then he stood. Where is he? Front porch. Waiting. Grave moved toward the door. Behind him, Ash stood. Then Knuckles, Reaper, Riot, every iron vulture who could stand. They walked together toward the entrance, toward another lost kid asking for help, toward another impossible fight they had no business taking. Grave opened the door. Outside stood a teenager with a black eye and a baby wrapped in a threadbare blanket. Rain hammered the streets. Lightning split the sky. And in the kid's eyes, Grave saw the same desperate hope he'd seen in Eli's face 3 months ago. The same hope that said maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't entirely cruel. The kid's voice shook. Are you the Iron Vultures? Yeah, Grave said. We are. Can you help us? Please. Nobody else will. Grave looked at his brothers, saw the same calculation happening behind every pair of eyes, saw the weight of consequences and danger and the very real possibility that this time they wouldn't all make it out alive. Then he stepped aside. Get inside, kid. As the teenager stumbled through the doorway carrying his sister, Grave caught Ash's eye. The old biker's expression was unreadable, but something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance. They were outlaws. Criminals. Men the world had written off and forgotten, but they were also the only people who showed up when it mattered, and that would have to be enough. Grave closed the door against the storm and turned to face the terrified kid now standing in his clubhouse, surrounded by dangerous men who'd just chosen to risk everything for strangers. What's your name? Grave asked. Marcus. And this is my sister Riley. Okay, Marcus. Here's how this works. You're safe here. Tonight, and for as long as it takes to figure out next steps. But I need you to be honest with me about everything. Can you do that? Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. Good. Start from the beginning. And as the kid began to talk, haltingly, fearfully, desperately, Grave felt the familiar weight settle across his shoulders. The weight of responsibility, of protection, of being the last line of defense for people nobody else cared about. It was heavy. It was exhausting. It would probably kill him someday, but it was also the only thing that made him feel human. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, wounded men gathered around a scared kid and made silent promises they'd probably die trying to keep. Because that's what family did. Not the kind you were born into, the kind you built, the kind you chose, the kind you bled for. And as dawn broke over Blackwater Ridge, the Iron Vultures prepared for another war they had no business fighting. Because sometimes the safest people in the world really are the ones who look the most dangerous. And sometimes that's exactly what broken people need to believe in. 6 weeks later, Marcus and Riley stood in a federal courthouse wearing new clothes and new names, ready to testify against the stepfather who'd tried to destroy them. The Iron Vultures sat in the gallery, scarred, weathered, dangerous. A silent wall of protection that made sure nobody forgot these kids had people who gave a damn. When the verdict came back guilty, Marcus turned around and looked at Grave. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Just nodded. Grave nodded back. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, questions flew about motorcycle clubs and vigilante justice and whether the Iron Vultures were heroes or criminals. Grave didn't answer any of them, just walked past the chaos toward where his Harley sat parked in defiant solitude, climbed on, and rode away. Because the truth was, it didn't matter what anyone called them. What mattered was showing up, again and again, for people who had nowhere left to turn. And as Grave disappeared into traffic with his brothers flanking him like an honor guard, he thought about Eli's drawing tucked against his heart, thought about Marcus's nod of gratitude, thought about every scared kid who'd ever knocked on their door asking for the one thing the world refused to give them: hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in a world as broken as theirs, sometimes something was enough. The Harleys roared through Blackwater Ridge as the sun set behind industrial ruins and neon signs flickered to life against gathering darkness. And somewhere in that chaos of engines and exhaust and worn leather cuts, a family rode together, not bound by blood, bound by choice. And that made all the difference. The iron vultures are still riding, still protecting, still showing up when nobody else will. And somewhere out there, kids they saved are living lives they never thought possible. Not because the system worked, but because dangerous men chose to be something better. That's the real story. That's the one worth remembering. Thanks for riding with us. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. And remember, the safest people in the world are the ones who look the most dangerous. Don't forget it.